I'm very much dedicated to raw milk. It's a fantastic healing food. It's the most wonderful immune system food you can eat.
Welcome to the Wise Traditions Podcast, sponsored by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
I'm your host, Hilda Labrada Gore. My guest today is Mark McAfee, an internationally recognized expert in raw milk safety and production. He happened into raw milk quite by accident, as you'll hear in today's episode. But now Mark is one of its most passionate and dynamic advocates. His mission is to make known its nutritional benefits and allay the public's fears about the product. In 2011, Mark founded the Raw Milk Institute, a nonprofit dedicated to the establishment of standards for raw milk and the education of farmers and consumers all over the world. Mark is also the CEO and founder of Organic Pastures Dairy Company near Fresno, California. Wise Traditions is supported by Green Pasture Products, offering fermented cod liver oil, concentrated butter oil, and coconut oil in a variety of products and blends. Go to greenpastureproducts.com. And the Weston A. Price Foundation. There are two events coming up that we want to bring to your attention. Nourish Vermont Traditional Foods and Health Gathering, June 2nd to the 4th, and Real Foods Retreat in New York, June 3rd to the 7th. For information on either one, go to the westonaprice.org website and click on events. If you'd like to hear live recordings of other events, go to the podcast page on the website and click on Mixler. Go to Showreel, and you'll get to hear some live recordings of events that we've conducted recently. And now, on to the conversation. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Mark.
Good morning.
Good morning, indeed.
Well, it's a sunny, beautiful morning. It's going to be nice, 75 degrees and sunny today. The cows all out munching on the grass.
Oh, it sounds idyllic. I want to come out your way. But in the meantime, I wanted to talk to you about raw milk. I understand you're an expert on the subject. How did this come about? Have you always been into milk?
Well, no. I was a certified paramedic for 17 years and a EMS or emergency medical services provider, administrator and director of operations, and I was in the HR department for many years. And my whole life was medicine. My wife is in medicine. She has her master's in nursing, so our life was medicine. I grew up on a farm, and I did some hobby farming all through my life, but I'm now 54 years old, and for the last 17 years have owned and operated Organic Pastures Dairy. This didn't start out as a raw dairy. It started out as a dairy that was organic certified, grass-fed, but then sold all its milk off to be pasteurized by Organic Valley. But we didn't realize that Altadena had closed just 6 months before we started operations, and Altadena was the world's largest raw milk producer in Los Angeles. So there were 23 million people in Los Angeles that were desperate for raw milk, and we didn't know that. When we started, people started showing up at our dairy with ice chests wanting our raw milk, and they explained to me what raw milk was all about, and I fell in love right away. Within a month, I just thought that stuff was the greatest thing in the world. And I've always been dedicated for the last 17 years to the ever improvement of raw milk safety and production practices and sharing that information with people around the world. And I'm very much dedicated to raw milk. It's a fantastic healing food. It's the most wonderful immune system food you can eat. Fermented raw milk and raw milk is absolutely curative in terms of what it does for children's immune systems. Ear infections are reduced dramatically. Colds are reduced. Asthma is reduced. Eczema is eliminated in just a few weeks. And Crohn's is a cure for Crohn's. I mean, when people are faced with having 10 feet of their intestines removed and pooping through a plastic bag the rest of their life, at 25 years old, raw milk becomes a pretty reasonable alternative. And so we've got ourselves a real interesting thing going on with raw milk as a medical food, as well as a delicious, just a beverage that people just enjoy because it's so good for their bones and their teeth and their lives. And in California, raw milk is 100% legal. It's very tough. It's not an easy regulatory environment, but our products are now found in 700 stores throughout the state. And we're a thriving company with 75 employees and milking 500 cows and have a real cutting-edge food safety plan, which really works well. So it's exciting. Raw milk's an exciting place to be.
Oh my gosh, well, you make it sound amazing, and yet I know that raw milk is very controversial. There are many people who say it's dangerous, it's unethical to give it to people when it hasn't been pasteurized. Can you tell us some of the history, Mark? Where is all that coming from?
Fear is the greatest way to move people in the marketplace. And right now, If you look at milk around the world, it's in a free fall. And we're talking about pasteurized milk in terms of value. Nobody wants it. People are eating a lot of cheese and they're eating a lot of yogurt, but fluid pasteurized milk is in a free fall. There is around the world, in Ireland, England, Australia, New Zealand, all across the United States and Canada, the production costs far exceed what the farmers are getting for the milk. In other words, every time they ship milk off the farm, they lose money. And there's no way that the farmers can impact that price. They don't cooperate together. And these prices are internationally dropping because people are abandoning pasteurized milk. However, internationally, there is a loud demand for raw milk. Mm-hmm. The reason for this is there is a glut of milk in the world. And there is no concern whatsoever for the value or quality of that milk. It can be produced in very sloppy conditions. It can be produced with high bacteria counts and without regard for safety or quality. You just dump the milk in a truck, send it off to be pasteurized, and the pasteurization equipment renders it safe and make it into whatever product you want. However, here's the problem. That production mantra, that protocol of just dump the milk into the truck and send it off, creates an oversupply of milk. That's number one. Number two, the pasteurization process creates the most allergenic food in America. If you go to the FDA website and just Google in, put in your little search engine there, put in most allergenic food. Don't suggest what it is, just put out the question. Mm-hmm. You'll come up with the FDA or the NIH, or CDC. There'll be a website that says, here's the top 10 most allergenic food in America. In fact, they call it the top 8. Mm-hmm. Number 1 is fluid pasteurized milk. Number 1. So if a mother knows that her child gets allergies, runny noses, ear infections, mucus buildup because of the immune system response to this very, very allergenic food that's filled with all these changed proteins and all these dead bacteria that trigger the body to go, whoa, what's this crap? The mother's going to say no more of that. And in fact, doctors prescribed get off dairy if you have allergies or eczema or asthma. So there's a medical trend towards getting off dairy. That's pasteurized dairy. And you see that in the marketplace for the dairymen who can't sell this stuff to save their lives. So you have a 100-year anniversary now of pasteurization. And what you find is the human biome, what makes us human, can't drink the stuff because it's so allergenic and so non-digestible. Pasteurization, when properly performed, changes every protein. There's 2,100 different kinds of protein found in raw milk. They're all denatured by the pasteurization process to some degree. Most all the bacteria are killed, which means that they're broken apart into little pieces. And those little pieces of bacteria are foreign to the body. And we have an immune response. We actually mount a whole mucus response to try to gather up all this crap and get it out of our bodies, which is a mucus response. And so we have a real problem in that physiologically consumers are rejecting fluid pasteurized milk, but they realize that through the internet and education and your podcast and other places and the human experience between people communicating, that raw milk is completely different than that. Completely different than that. Remember, raw milk is breast milk. Children thrive on breast milk. Breast milk has all of its proteins intact. They're none of them are denatured. They all play a very important part of the human building blocks of life. All the enzymes are there. The bacteria, breast milk is not sterile. It has up to 700 different kinds of bacteria, including pathogens. And all those bacteria exercise the baby's immune system to build antibodies and build an immune system because 80% of the immune system of a child is in his gut. Right. So what's breast milk? Well, it's the first food of life. It's literally love from mama to baby. Now, what is raw milk? Same thing. It is the building blocks of life. All of its whole food constituents are there and intact. People don't have allergies to raw milk. In fact, it makes their allergies better. All the big studies, there's 17 studies done in Europe over the last 12 years. They all show that children that drink raw milk have their asthma, allergies, and eczema dramatically reduced or prevented entirely.
Wow. Well, this is so fantastic. I've heard some of these stories that you've told me. I've heard about the amazing healing and curative properties of raw milk and these anecdotal stories that you're right cannot be suppressed by the media at large, right? No. But I know there's a reason pasteurization came about. Can you back up and tell us why people came up with that in the first place?
Absolutely. There's a very good reason why it happened in the whole historical perspective. In the 1600s and 1700s, there was literally a few hundred yards between dairies across America. I mean, everybody had a cow or their neighbor had a cow. And wherever you had grass and sunshine and rain, you had food for the cow. You couldn't eat grass, you couldn't eat rain, you couldn't eat sun, but you could eat what came from that if the mammal ate it, and you could then get it. So cows, sheep, even horses, muskox, donkeys, camels, they all produced milk. And wherever you could take a mammal with you, you could have food to eat today and not have to grow milk or grow food for later. A lot of that food would be killed off by frosts, or another animal would eat it, or something would happen where you didn't have food. Also, it was hard to hunt down your food. Well, here's the thing. We discovered, 10,000 years ago that you could capture milk from a domesticated animal and actually have food for the long term. In fact, old milk is called cheese. It ferments and becomes cheese. So cheese has been embraced around the world as a fantastic way to hold food for later in the wintertime. So in the 1600s, you had America just teeming with dairies, little micro dairies, 2 or 3 cows here, 2 or 3 cows there. There was a church and a dairy, church and a dairy, church and dairy, all across America. Well, people started to move into the cities in the 1800s, and they would take the cows with them. And in New York, Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, you have all these cows being brought in the city. Well, there's no pasture in the city. There was no sunshine for the cows to appreciate the grass. And so all you had is poop, bunch of manure and crap in the city, and you had no food. But what you did have in the city was breweries. They were creating these breweries to make rum. And so wherever you had rum distilleries, you had these brewers' distilleries creating this distiller's mash, which is a byproduct of distilling alcohol. Well, the cows did pretty well on that, but they did very poorly in milk production. And so you had these really, really, really horrible conditions, with filthy conditions, with no clean water, food that cows had never eaten before, which was brewers' distillers' grains, no green grass, and the people that would milk the cows by hand had tuberculosis. They just got off of Ellis Island. They were the poor and the downtrodden. They weren't the rich and the elite and healthy. So it was a filthy hellhole where you had cows in the city in the 1850s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. So there were people, they were losing 50% of the children that would drink this crap died. And so there was not a lot of appreciation for bacteria, no hand cleaning, no water. The same water that was used to wash the sewer out was used to drink. It was disgusting. So in 1893, a guy by the name of Dr. Coit established the American Association of Medical Milk Commissions, and he was a physician, and he had lost a grandchild to raw milk consumption. He said, we're going to have clean raw milk. And so they certified dairies to have these very impeccable clean standards, and what do you know, literally overnight, these dairies were doing quite well and providing milk that was called physician's milk, because physicians would oversee the milk production, and children would thrive with it, and nobody was dying. In fact, they were really thriving and doing well. So the distillers fed grain cows, and the distillers' dairies actually were made illegal by 1915 and 1920. And so you had, pasteurization coming in 1893 along with Dr. Coit, and Strauss brought this in from Europe, from France, where they were using pasteurization for wine and beer production, because you don't want to have any alcohol with bacteria in it. You only want yeast. And when you cook things, you get yeast with sugar that makes alcohol. You don't want any bacteria in it. So the pasteurization process of heating would kill off the bacteria but preserve the yeast. So anyway, long story short, you had this bifurcation, this branch in the road in 1893 where you had clean raw milk for human consumption by Dr. Coit and the American Association of Medical Milk Commissions, where kids thrived on it, and it was prescribed by doctors. This is the pink-cheeked baby that thrived. And then you had pasteurization that actually cooked the milk, and that became very industrially in vogue, because no longer did you have 50% of the kids dying, you only had 10% of the kids dying, because water was still a big problem. And by 1945, pasteurization became very popular because it extended shelf life. You didn't need ice to cool the milk very quickly. And guess what? You didn't have to worry about quality. And in 1945, remember, all the farm boys had gone off to fight the Germans in Europe. We didn't have anybody to milk the cows anyway. So it made for a lower quality standard to still have milk available for human consumption, because you could cook it. And all milk qualified, or most all milk qualified for human consumption, because you just cooked the heck out of it. And that's beginning the end of raw milk, because at that point, if you think about 1945, we settled our social problems with nuclear bombs, and we sprayed DDT on everything, and smoking was good for asthma. We were clueless when it came to nutrition. Clueless. And so as more and more time evolved to the 1950s and 60s, pasteurization became a big industrial system, a process that made cheap food. and you saw the falling of the number of cows across America in terms of the number of dairies, and you saw consolidation of dairies rapidly, where you no longer had 20 cow dairies, you now had 200 cow dairies, and now we have 1,500 cow dairies here in California, with our biggest being 20,000 cow dairies.
Wow.
But it's all pasteurization, because that extends shelf life. Not good for gut life for your body, but great for shelf life in industrial uses, because any milk qualifies. You don't have to worry about quality of the farm. But that's also brought on this advent of bankruptcies in dairies, because now you have a glut of milk you can't get any value for. Mm-hmm. And the big dairies are hoping for low prices, so the small dairies die off and the prices go back up, and they can be king of the hill. They can be very profitable. So you have this cutthroat system for dairy operators in America that's killing pasteurized fluid milk in the marketplace. At the same time, you have small dairies, 10, 15, 20, 50, 100 cow dairies, that are thriving with local raw milk production using very, very intense food safety programs, much like Dr. Coit suggested back in 1893, and plus a whole lot more, because now we have some really good rapid testing to find our bacteria, the bad bacteria, the E. coli and listerias and campylobacters and salmonellas. Literally in 12 to 14 hours, we have a test now that'll tell you whether it's in there or not, where, they used to be 4 or 5 days. So now we have technology crossroads that helps us very quickly identify whether milk is safe or not by checking for coliforms and so on and so forth. So there's been an evolution in technology, and there's been a realization of the allergenicity of pasteurized fluid milk, and the markets have responded. And now what you've got is this pasteurized fluid industrial machine, which is having freaking seizures over the fact that losing market share to small dairies that are having local sales that are thriving with high prices for their milk, versus the industrial dairies, which are freaking out because they can't sell their fluid milk. So you have a revolution and an evolution going on right now all around the world, where people are rejecting fluid pasteurized milk and trying to come up with better alternatives, including not drinking milk at all.
Right. That is a big movement. Yeah. And I have heard what you're saying. There's been a lot of pushback from these big industrialized dairies, because the last thing you want to do is lose more market share.
Exactly.
So they are not happy with this kind of underground raw milk movement, but it's becoming more and more of a thing, because I guess, like you said, people can't deny the anecdotal evidence around them of how beneficial this product is. We want to stop and acknowledge our sponsors, Green Pasture Products. Green Pasture Products produces fermented cod liver oil and concentrated butter oil in a variety of flavors in liquid gel and capsule form. They also offer organic virgin coconut oil, virgin coconut ghee, and a complete oil blend that includes all of the nourishing oils. Lastly, they produce skincare balms and various byproducts that enrich the soil and feed of farm animals. And the Weston A. Price Foundation. We want to highlight 2 events coming up in early June. In Vermont, June 2nd to the 4th, is Nourish Vermont Traditional Foods and Health Gathering. Learn the core principles of traditional diets inspired by the teachings of the Weston A. Price Foundation, and explore how embracing this lifestyle can contribute to one's health, wellness, and longevity. Sally Fallon Morell will be there, along with a number of well-known health experts and speakers. And in New York, pamper yourself with a getaway of beauty and delicious traditional foods, June 3rd to the 7th. There will be back-to-back events, and seminars include sessions and workshops on cultured dairy and beverages, summer soups and stocks, and cooking with essential oils. Again, you can find more information on both of these events on our website, westonaprice.org. Click on events. And now, back to the conversation. Raw milk isn't legal in every state. So tell us more about, how do we make sure we're getting milk from a safe provider?
That is the biggest, hardest question being faced by a consumer today, is when you go down to the local dairy, odds are that dairy is not set up to produce raw milk for human consumption. We always say there's 2 kinds of raw milk in America, raw milk for the people and raw milk for the pasteurizer. And right now they're intentionally being commingled and confused, because the markets, the big industrial marketplace, doesn't want to have clarity there. Because if there's clarity, then there's clear distinction between which one's which. Mm-hmm. And so the best thing to do is have the FDA just says all raw milk is horrible. Well, that's not true. if you take raw milk intended to be pasteurized, it could be any number of things. It could be great, or it could be very, very toxic. Because remember, you have 50 dairies and they'll dump the milk in the same tank. You have one dairy out there doing a great job, which is kind of seldom because why would they? They're not getting paid for it. But you have one dairy doing great, 49 not. You put them all together, or even 49 doing great and one doing not. Doesn't matter. Somebody's going to get sick.
They're saying raw milk is bad because they're looking at the milk before it gets pasteurized from these mega dairies, right? They're not looking at this. Okay, got it.
Exactly. And there is a standard, a universal national standard. It's called grade A raw milk, but it's intended for pasteurization. And guess what? They never, ever, ever test that milk for bad bugs, ever, even after pasteurization. They solely rely on the heating of the milk to 165 degrees for 17 seconds as the sole kill step to render, quote, it safe, also rendering it very hard to digest and also very hard to eat because of the allergenicity. But nonetheless, the industrial paradigm is freaking out for losing a market share, and the rules support the industrial paradigm. So what you've got now is California raw milk, 100% legal, but very hard to do because very heavily regulated. Pennsylvania, 100% legal, heavily regulated, lots of testing. So those are two states that are examples, but you've got about 12 states now that make legal raw milks for sale that have strict standards, like Arizona, New Mexico, Washington, Pennsylvania, Maine, Connecticut, California. Those states all have legal raw milk for sale in stores. However, there are a bunch of states that make raw milk legal if you buy a part of a cow, like a cow share. Like Colorado is an excellent example of cow share state. Wyoming is, and there's other states as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm not giving the whole list of all the states that do each of these things. I'm just giving examples, by the way. Mm-hmm. So there's about half the states in the United States that you can get raw milk some way legally, and there's about half the states that have even made it illegal, very difficult to buy raw milk. And so this is all about the entrenched concept that there can never be a reasonable safety for raw milk. Now, I will say this. Raw milk, even intended for human consumption, can make some people sick once in a long while. It's possible. However, there's been no deaths from raw milk since 1972. There's been a couple of deaths from raw milk cheeses imported from Mexico that were illegal from Listeria, but there's been no deaths. There's been about 1,500 total illnesses with everybody recovering from consumption of raw milk of any kind, including the bad raw milk from intended for pasteurization. All raw milk in the CDC website database shows that there's been no deaths from raw milk, just raw milk cheeses. So when you think about safety and you think about the fact that pasteurization, if you think about how many people died from pasteurized dairy products like pasteurized ice creams, pasteurized fluid milk, there's been about 80 people or more that have died from pasteurized dairy products since 1974 or 72.
Big difference.
Yeah. Well, a lot more people drink pasteurized than raw, but there's been no deaths. So it's really very interesting. And then more on top of that, there's been about 450,000 people that have become seriously ill, like with salmonella or listeria, from pasteurized fluid milk markets. So the word risk and the word fear come to mind. Mm-hmm. Now, you look at the market, you look at Bill Marler, the big ambulance-chasing attorney up in Seattle, who makes literally billions of dollars on promoting anxiety and panic and fear and instilling scare in people because he makes money by having people come to him to make money. They sue you for liability. There's a whole industry around the liability of foods. Tomatoes, apples, the dart killed 3 people a couple of years ago. Lettuce, oh my God, spinach.
Yes.
Anybody, raw almonds, raw pistachio, you name it, anything that causes somebody to get ill, there's a liability industry around prosecution and collection on the insurance policies, which are multi-million-dollar policies. So we have a real problem in America structurally that we're set up to fail nutritionally. How are we supposed to create a whole food product for people to consume from a store or even off of a farm if whole foods by design have enzymes and beneficial bacteria in them, and the consumers have depressed immune systems because they're more and more alienated from those food sources because they're no longer on the farm? We're set up to fail because we compensate and reimburse sterility, which is long shelf life and depressed immune systems, and the fact that liability attorneys make billions of dollars a year on prosecuting anybody that could make somebody ill, when in fact illness is the process by which you adjust your immune system to be more accommodating to a whole food diet and have a stronger immune system. So we got a real sickness here, And nobody's bright enough in government to figure it out, even though, and this is really, really important, Hilda, super important, even though in 2003, the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, in 2003, announced to Congress what they found the human genome to be. The human genome requires beneficial bacteria in order to be complete. And nobody knew what to do with that because everybody thought, oh my God, the body's sterile. There's no bacteria there. Any bacteria in the body's going to make it sick. When in fact, it's the exact opposite. We're packed filled with bacteria, and those bacteria are commensal. They live in us. They culture us. They colonize us. They're required for the completion of the genetic code for making us human. This is what was discovered in 2003. It took $4 billion in 12 years to figure that out. So now we're living in the aftermath of the total confusion in medicine that's going, wow, antibiotics really can screw us up, and we need to have probiotics like yogurts and raw milks and things like that, and the food to feed those probiotics. And we are in total confusion right now in terms of Western medicine and the germ theory, because our own NIH with $4 billion of investment has discovered that we only have 27,000 genes in our body which are actually human. There's millions of them that are bacterial, that are actually critical to complete the way that our genome works. So we've got massive confusion in the science. We've got emerging new science. We've got all kinds of stuff going on. We've got yogurts going crazy in the marketplace. We've got depression of fluid pasteurized milk prices. We've got bankruptcy in the dairy industry. We've got small raw milk producers that are thriving across America that are getting beaten about the head and chest with sticks because of the fact that there's liability with it and people might get sick. And we've got new emerging technologies supporting those small dairies that are doing a great job of producing raw milk and thriving, like Charlotte Smith in Oregon doing a fantastic job of producing exceptionally high-quality raw milk. We've got organic pastures dairy with a test and hold program, which catches any kind of pathogen before it gets released out in the marketplace. You've got Ed Shank back in Pennsylvania that has a wonderful test and hold program where he knows what's going on in his milk before it gets released. So there's a whole new paradigm of food. And it's being brought on by the slow food movement. It's being brought on by Weston A. Price, the Price Pottenger Foundation. It's probably being brought on by nutritionists that realize that food is the preventative aspect in medicine. It's not how many drugs you can take or how many surgeries you can get. It's food. It's nutrition. It's whole food nutrition and the activity of the gut and the immune system function.
Absolutely.
This is a brave new world. This is a brave new world.
It's exciting. I see all the time, of course I run in foodie circles, but people who are committed to this concept that let food be your medicine and let medicine be your food. They quote Hippocrates from who knows what century. So it's very exciting. And I liked what you were saying, Mark, going back to the sterile food. I think you're right. There was a time in the United States in particular when they thought the food should be sterile, and they thought, okay, well, this will make us well in the short term, but they didn't realize it would make us sick in the long term because we need living food. I tell people, I see milk as a living product, and I tell people it's like yogurt. It has bacteria in it that's good for us. That's why raw milk is so important.
You're absolutely right. And it's interesting. We really don't know what raw milk is. We don't. We have an idea, but we don't really know. I go to the International Milk Genomics conferences every year. I've gone to 4 of them. I've gone internationally down to Sydney, Australia. I've gone to Aarhus, Denmark. I've been here in the United States, UC Davis. And these are the PhDs that are trying to make a better baby formula. And they have looked into milk and looked at all the constituents of it, the butterfat cells, the bacteria, the enzymes, the proteins, all the oligosaccharides and the specialized sugars. I mean, it's amazing what it is. It's a living biome unto itself. It has RNAs, which are fantastic pieces of DNA which transfer information from mommy to baby. It's got incredible, it's a life force in its own right. So when you apply heat to that, it changes entirely. And we really don't know what raw milk is. It's such a fascinating, deep thing. So when we really look at food and we look at the nuances of the detail inside of raw milk, it is a phenomenal healing food. And if you look at the purpose that it serves in life, it's the first food of life. Mm-hmm. And it brings life to babies. All mammals thrive on their mother's breast raw milk. And humans, for the last 10,000 years, have had a distinct advantage as a species because we've been able to capitalize on that food and nourish our bodies for all of our ages of life. Now, not everybody drinks raw milk their whole lives, but I tell you what, a lot of people eat raw milk cheeses, and a lot of people that eat kefirs and yogurts. And the food in the raw milk that feeds bacteria is one in its own in the world. We know now, as scientists know now, that if you take a probiotic pill, it has very little effect because the probiotics flush right through you. But here's the thing. If you eat the foods that probiotic bacteria want, eat those foods, the probiotics stick around and they are residual and they do colonize and they do have a longer lasting effect. So we know that bacteria follow food, not the other way around. We have to eat the right nutrition and then the right kind of bacteria colonize our gut to eat that food in our gut. It's not the other way around. You don't eat the bacteria and then feed the bacteria whatever you care, whatever comes along. No. You have to have the right nutrition, the prebiotics, to feed the probiotics in order to have the right genetics in your gut to have an immune system that functions worth the darn. So they're discovering now that food leads the show. Food leads the show. So whole food nutrition. There's a special thing found in raw milk and raw milk kefirs, which is really powerful, and that is the oligosaccharides. Oligosaccharides are specialized sugars. Just 8 years ago, Dr. Bruce German up at UC Davis discovered that they are not digestible by human beings, even babies. Oligosaccharides are specialized sugars. These specialized sugars do not serve a role in our cellular function of our bodies, like glucose, which feeds the cells. What oligosaccharides do is simply protect the bacteria in our gut and feed the bacteria the gut. Wow. It is a specialized food that all it does is feed the gut bacteria. All it does is help the bacteria transition from the stomach through the acid environment to duodenum, where the pH is low, into the large intestine and small intestine, where the bacteria thrive with being fed by oligosaccharide sugars. Well, now they figured it out. Well, you know what? When a baby's born, there's no sugar in the gut. And these first sugars, these oligosaccharides, actually help colonize the gut with the right kind of bacteria and continue to feed and protect them. Well, that same kind of feeding protection happens later in life when adults drink raw milk with these oligosaccharide sugars. So it's a phenomenally important and essential part of building the immune system and feeding the immune system, along with other wonderful whole foods, which also bring on the good bacteria. So unprocessed whole foods are the food that good bacteria want to feed on. And that's the mismatch in America, that we just think, oh, eat sugar, drink alcohol, do whatever you want, and just pop your probiotic pill. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. You have to create the environment in which the probiotic bacteria will thrive. And then the probiotics will do a reasonable job. But you have to lead with nutrition, and that's a really critical thing missing in the whole discussion across America, because nutrition has not been the basis for medicine in the last 100 years. It's been frequency to go to the doctor. It's been surgeries. It's been the newfangled drug. It's been all this kind of crap. And now we find that drugs are the number one killer in America. And it's really, literally always been. Hippocrates said it himself 2,500 years ago, that food be your medicine, medicine be your food.
Absolutely. Well, I love hearing you talk about this. You are so knowledgeable and passionate. Do you have any final words of advice to the listener, to the person who maybe hasn't even tried raw milk? What would you say to them?
I would say this. Risk is something that needs to be looked at. If you look at a person who drives a Volvo with a seatbelt on, it's the safest car in the world. People die in Volvos with seatbelts on every year, okay? But they're extremely safe cars. People fly in aircraft, but aircraft crash, but it's considered the safest mode of transportation in the world. But people die in it. So risk is a computation you have to make in terms of evaluation of what level of risk will you take to get the true fantastic benefits of raw milk. Remember this, raw milk's never killed anybody in the last 50 years, 45 years. It has made a few people ill, yes. And if you go to a place that has really shabby conditions, a lot of people may get ill from that. But if you go to some place that really cares about the raw milk production, the risk of that, even though there's maybe a risk once in a long, long while, far, far, far outweighs any kind of a benefit, the problem with the risk-benefit ratio. So this is my final point, don't be scared by the fear campaign, which is hollow. It's hollow fear campaign, because what it's doing is it's putting everybody in a herd over a cliff. We are literally a herd stampeding over a cliff based on the fear campaign, which is based on ignorance and based on making money on liability and market protection from an old paradigm which is dying right now. And we have to be smarter than that and realize, wait a minute, I'm going to go the other direction, the direction that is based on very strong immune systems, prevention through nutrition, long, healthy lives, not having my kids sick all the time, that kind of preventative environment, which is based on probiotics, based on nutrition, based on whole food nutrition, based on raw milk, based on kefirs and good cheeses and all those wonderful foods that we have that are from our local sources, or even from a good, reasonable retail store that embraces those kinds of foods. But we cannot become part of that fear campaign, which is going to chase us off the sterilized food cliff, which is all about more drugs, going to the doctor more often, surgeries to correct overweight, antibiotics for every sniffle, sterile foods that ruin our immune systems, Crohn's disease where we have young people that are losing their intestines and crapping in plastic bags the rest of their lives. This is insane. It's not sustainable. It's the wrong direction. We must return back to food and nutrition as our sustainable medicine. And that's the change right now. That's the big evolution we're going through right now. And it's about consumer consciousness. The internet has done a great job of educating people. But I would look at this. I would look at the wonderful resources available through the Raw Milk Institute, who has a lot of the wonderful European studies that are there that consumers can read. Go to farmers that really know what they're doing with raw milk production, and embrace whole foods. And in doing so, you will change your life. You'll change your children's lives for the better.
Fantastic. Well, Mark, thank you so much for taking time. It's turned out to be a wonderful conversation. I hope we can talk again sometime.
Anytime, Hilda.
Thanks for listening today. Become a member of the Weston A. Price Foundation for $40 or $25 if you're a student or a senior. Your contribution helps us to get this important health information to people all around the world. Go to our website, westonaprice.org, and click on Become a Member. Again, thanks for listening. Wise Traditions is brought to you by the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts.